Last week, Tucker Carlson interviewed Laura Delano, a survivor of heavy psychiatric treatment, and is the author of a new book called Unshrunk, a story of psychiatric treatment resistance. During their conversation, they discussed the myth of the chemical imbalance, the idea that mental unwellness is rooted in neurochemicals in the brain, which are firing incorrectly or in disproportionate levels in comparison to a healthy brain. And despite zero evidence nor any scientific proof of a neurochemical imbalance causing depression, and by extension, neurochemical imbalances causing other mental illnesses, this is still a foundational rationale for prescribing pharmaceutical drugs, which are artificial laboratory chemicals, in order to rebalance this phantom imbalance. And if you remember, this would be considered the seventh layer of one's identity formation, the brain chemistry itself, the physical manifestation of one's brain. And to base one's identity, say, I'm a mentally ill patient, I'm a sick person, I am so screwed up because of the chemicals in my brain. And you'll listen to Ms. Delano talk like that throughout the interview, how she would look at herself in that way. That's what her identity was, based on this physical characteristic, this brain chemistry. So the psychiatry pharmaceutical industrial complex has been a profound failure in regards to improving the lives of mentally unwell patients. That doesn't include daily consumption of pills or consumption of their products. And she even she mentions in the interview, which I wasn't aware of, that electroshock therapy is still in use today. This was a very highly destructive technique used back in the 40s and 50s, I believe, where you'd shock a person, electrically shock them in order to cure them of some kind of mental unwellness. But today what they do is they put a device, kind of like a battery, in your chest, and it shoots electrical pulses to certain parts of the brain. And this is incredible because it completely disregards that there's already a natural circuitry within the body that can be rebalanced, but to put a physical item in a person is the height of materialistic medicine, using an outside device rather than treat the body holistically as this amazing circuitry. And not even to mention the more subtle circuitry, say in acupuncture, how there are different meridians in our body that can be stimulated in order to redirect flows of energy. So all of this is completely disregarded in modern psychiatry and in general in the modern psychological treatment world. But this world, especially psychiatry, has been a phenomenal success in creating lifelong patients who are unable to wean off their medications and numbing them to contradictions they perceive of a sick society that's detached from nature. And they've also had amazing success in amassing tens of billions of dollars of profit and establishing the illusion that creating psychological well-being is in, again, manipulating brain chemistry. And when the drugs don't work, even after nearly a decade of treatment, as in the case of Ms. Delano, 9 years on drugs, 5 of them, she was told that she was immune to treatment. So in other words, as far as they're concerned, those people who are immune to treatment are just a lost cause, and they're condemned to having a defective brain chemistry for the rest of their life and to suffer because of it. So there's nothing they can do. Our treatment didn't work and that's it. There's no other way. So in the year 2025, it's as if correcting mental health and working with people's mental health issues is a complete mystery to this psychiatric establishment. And since they can't quantify the problem, say in the chemical imbalance, they're trying to give numbers. What's the quantity? What is the actual numerical imbalance between how many things are out of balance or imbalance? They can't quantify the problem. And their pills, the pill cocktail solution, it doesn't even beat placebos, sugar pills. So stories like Ms. Delano's that Tucker was bringing out in his interview, they're as important as ever to be brought into the public debate, because there are millions. She says there are 60 million adults and 6 million children on these on these pills today in the United States. So it's important to see this long-term effect brought out by someone and just sharing her experience. And it's just amazing how an industry whose fundamental hypothesis has been completely discredited, but yet it's still around today, churning out patients. And it's, again, not really surprising when you just consider their profit motive. That's business as usual for them. So how does astrology play into this idea? Well, astrology, on the other hand, is a quantifiable science. It's based on the calculation of your geographical location on Earth in relation to the constantly shifting celestial phenomenon from the moment that we're born. So in other words, astrology is based on impartial mathematical calculations that we're measuring externally. We can see them. Astrology essentially is just math and physics. It's a numerical construct. So we quantify what's happening, but is what we're quantifying externally, is that affecting us internally, specifically psychologically? Critics of astrology would say, sure, you can measure the celestial bodies from the exact moment you are born and what's happening at the sky, what's transiting through the sky, but there's no effect whatsoever internally or psychologically on a person. It's just astronomy. There's a disconnect between what's happening externally and what's happening to us individually. But any astrologer from the ancient times until today would respond that the macro, the external, is affecting the micro, and that we are interconnected with celestial phenomenon. As above, so below. What modern scientists and modern psychologists are doing is that they're cutting off the causal possibility of the interconnectedness between the individual and the cosmos. They're saying it's not even possible that there's an interconnection. They'll say that though we interconnect with the plants and we interconnect with trees, there's an exchange of energy happening between, or there's an energetic exchange happening between people. But when it comes to the celestial phenomena, no, there's a cut there. There's no interchange happening there. There's no energetic reality between us. But think about it in just really simple examples, because I'm not going to go into a really deep dive into how astrology works, but just think about how I'm saying that it's no pure coincidence that the moon, the force of the divine feminine, has a 28-day cycle, and women have a 28-day ovulation cycle, give or take about a half a day or a day. And it's not superstitious that planting seeds during a 3/4 to a full moon, 3/4 waxing to a full moon, is going to make the plants grow faster. And farmers have known that for centuries. So the celestial phenomenon are affecting us whether we believe that they are or not. And there's a connection there between just the moon and the growth of plants. How is that happening? Well, the question is, how deep do you want to go in terms of understanding the effects of the celestial phenomenon? That's what astrologers are doing. How do we understand this interconnectedness? What can we discover from this? Well, we have centuries and millennia of traditions of people describing this. So we can really dive into to discover what is the truth of astrology. How is it actually working? And it's an investigation. It's something that you can dedicate yourself to learn about. And you can do it in a general way, kind of in a superficial way, and get some ideas. Or what astrologers do is that they dedicate their lives to understanding what is the actual relationship between us and the luminaries. And you can call the planets, the signs, the zodiac signs, and the houses spiritual or divine forces, but really what they are energetic realities which are beyond the scope of modern scientific understanding, because modern science has no way of quantifying them using materialist instruments. If we could visualize what the energetic forces would look like, I kind of visualize it as kind of rays, or kind of a atmosphere where you would kind of see, say, Jupiter's energy would be kind of a subtle orange glow, and it would be everywhere all the time. And so forth with all the planets. You would have this kind of force flowing around our realm, and if you could visualize it, you'd be able to see it. But again, modern science can't put a number on it, so they say it just doesn't exist. So rather than to counter psychiatry and to counter the way that wellness is treated, rather than chemical imbalances when a person is unwell, what we're actually dealing with are energetic imbalances within a person which are causing mental illness or mental wellness. So there is the forces within us, these planetary forces within us are out of balance, and that's what causes us to respond in certain ways. And there's so many levels to discover how a certain planet could be malfunctioning or not. And I've spent plenty of time discussing what each planet is, how it's functioning, how it can malfunction in the previous videos from the past about half a year. So you can go into those kind of introductory videos to discover just the basics, because we can go so much deeper into astrology, but those videos are meant to be introductions to really just understand on a basic level what they are and how they work. So astrology has an enormous potential to provide not just practical recommendations for how to sort out the difficult phases of life, but it also gives this spiritual dimension of understanding our purpose in the world that psychiatry and the broader psychological field is failing to address. It's an integral part of how we live our life, what gives us purpose, and how do we see ourselves beyond ourselves as an individual person. Well, astrology has this whole side of it that is about spiritual growth and to discover what your soul is pushing you towards to do in this lifetime. And again, that would be diving into the first layer of identity formation, understanding that you have a soul, you have a dimension, you have a part of you that doesn't die after your body dies. And what's the soul's purpose in this life? Using that to create your identity is the most expansive way to see yourself. And it's also important to remember that one of the most important figures in understanding the mind and human nature and in human archetypes and the symbols of ancient times and how we incorporate them into our understanding of humans today, that was Carl Jung. And he did not ignore the connection between astrology and psychology, and he was a proponent of deepening the research into more research into astrology to see how it works. And a quote that he has is, he says that when he says it means astrology represents, in essence, a system of original and fundamental qualities in a person's character, and therefore can be regarded as an equivalent of the individual psyche. So the profound effectiveness of astrology is not going to fade with time like psychiatry eventually will, because psychiatry is flawed in all these different ways. So the real crux of the issue is not whether the celestial phenomenon are affecting our lives on Earth. It's about astrologers and people interested in astrology deepening quality scientific astrology and communicating techniques that actually work to help people in their practical lived experiences. So getting stuck in the debate on whether it's real or not, that is just kind of the first level. Okay, it's real or it's not real. That could be debated all day. What needs to happen is for good astrology to be conducted and to treat it as a mathematical construct that is creating mathematical quantifiable effects energetically in a person. So an astrologer, when they're doing their reading, they're bringing their intuition into the process. But astrology isn't just intuitive to sense what a person needs to hear and allowing the information to flow through you. That is done. But to really get into the science of it and to get into the actual important techniques that work consistency. And when it comes to psychiatry, it'll eventually fail, basically, just a matter of time. Think about it like this, that false ideas and paradigms, they only survive because of relentless propaganda. And when the funding of the propaganda dries up, those paradigms essentially die and become distant memories that are just details of history about the trial and errors of what human beings do. So think about the Soviet Union. It eventually just collapsed because the propaganda couldn't hold up the system that was created that went against natural human desires to get ahead. And the natural human, communism failed for certain reasons because it's not a conducive system to the natural world. And you could prop it up as much as you can, but eventually it's going to die because it's a paradigm that's based on false ideas. But fundamentally true ideas and fundamentally true paradigms and concepts, they're never going to die. and always remain in human consciousness no matter how much propaganda is spent to eradicate them. So that's what astrology is. So astrology, or to better put, the way to describe astrology, the recognition that celestial phenomena are affecting us and affecting all life on Earth, it has been central to all human civilizations prior to the scientific revolution and the European Enlightenment period. They couldn't quantify astrology and they said it wasn't real. So no matter how much effort is put into discrediting astrology, the modern world that we live in, it's not real. No matter how much it's ignored by the psychiatric and the psychological establishments, it's never going to go away because it's fundamentally true. It'll always stay with us. People always come back and realize there's something true about it. Excuse me. So the key to moving astrology, to putting astrology back into its respectful place that it deserves to improve mental wellness, is conducting good astrology, quality astrology that is repeatable and is accurately describing a particular experience in the context of each person and in the context of each person's life. So in other words, it means scientific astrology. And in my opinion, the best form of scientific astrology is tropical Vedic astrology, the astrology that I practice, which you can learn about a little bit more on my website. But all astrologers have their strong opinions about what are the best methods, but I recommend tropical Vedic. So in conclusion, Western society has been hoodwinked by the psychiatric establishment into believing their science and trusting them to provide effective solutions. But they failed, and it's conversations like Ms. Delano's with Tucker show the comprehensive failure. And to move the conversation forward, it's not enough to just critique what isn't working, even though it's important, like that interview. But for me, it's important to offer solutions that actually do work, having a vision forward. And astrology is not the only solution, of course, but it's going to become more and more relevant as one of the most effective tools for mental well-being as more people question what went wrong with psychiatry and psychology in modern times, and what could be a more practical, more viable, and at the same time an ancient method to understanding human nature in a more comprehensive way. So astrology has this capacity not to just give practical advice, but give broader and more spiritual and purposeful advice for people who are not reducing their existence down simply to their brain chemistry.